Start it over. Alrighty, so I figured I would talk on a few topics, culture topics. Are most of you all watching the BET Awards tonight? Because I know that's on, and I just took a glimpse of it, and Janet Jackson was talking, and she looks fabulous, by the way. But in any case, I want to talk about a few things. So, first off, rest in peace for Tony Brown. Um, of Tony Brown's journal. Do you all remember Tony Brown of Tony Brown's journal? I just remember when I was a kid, I don't know how I found out about him. Probably because we used to watch PBS so much anyway. So PBS was always on in our house, anything dealing with education, or even history and somewhat, politics. It was on, and my family really kind of encouraged you to be informed. And I was really into, I'm pretty sure I was into journalism because I ended up becoming a writer, and I love writing. And in our home and in my family's home, like my aunts, my great aunts and uncles, they always had newspapers around, the NAACP Crisis magazine, the Black Enterprise, and all these different publications were always around. I remember one of my aunts always got the different educational journals came to her house, and I spent time at her house during the summers. And that's probably how I started watching Tony Brown. So let me read a bit of Tony Brown's journal, not journal, but his bio. Quite impressive. And I'm sharing this because I would say, as someone who became a journalist myself and a writer, I can think about that creative writers or Black creative writers aren't the only ones who influenced my thinking, my creativity, or even my interest in writing. So I can say people like Tony Brown influenced my interest in writing and communications and the news, understanding the news in terms of the Black community, and being able to have the um, mental persistence to focus on creating, I guess you could say, creating media to share information. And so I do that as a podcaster, but I also did that when I was a student writer. I wrote for a bit at Hampton University when I was an undergrad student there. Wrote some articles for the Hampton Script. After college, I was a member of NABJ for a while, and I really had a general interest in writing. I've written for some online publications. I used to write hip hop editorials and culture editorials. I worked for a newspaper. So thinking about, all the things I was able to do, in college and after college in terms of writing and journalism, I look at a person like Tony Brown, who was a journalist and then had his own talk show. And I can say, oh, yeah, Tony Brown definitely inspired me. So let's read some of his bio. So he's considered a pioneering TV journalist, an educator, and a civil rights advocate. And he did pass recently in this past few days this week. He passed at the age of 93. And Tony Brown was the host and executive producer of Tony Brown's Journal, the longest running series in the history of the PBS network. Can you believe that? So that means, years, even before we had all the various talk show hosts that we know about, and probably even before Black Enterprise, or at least while Black Enterprise, the magazine founded by Earl G. Graves and his family, while that was being founded, you had people like Tony Brown doing the multimedia television journalism thing. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so it says that he transitioned on June 17th, so that was a few weeks ago. Brown was an influential television journalist, educator, and civil rights advocate whose groundbreaking work elevated Black voices in media and higher education for more than 4 decades. Widely regarded as a champion of truth, empowerment, and opportunity, Brown dedicated his life to the principle of self-help and the pursuit of excellence. And Toni Brown was also known as a prolific author, a keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Almost, I mean, these are the things that I really looked up to, as a kid. I'm like, Toni Brown. I won't read his whole bio, but I do want to say shout out to my alma mater, Hampton University, because Toni Brown, um, while I'm finding this, in addition to winning an NAACP Image Award in 1991 for Outstanding News, Talk, or Information Series or Special, he had a long running show that ran, from, it looks like the 70s, I want to say. When did he start his TV show? It ran for a long time, from the 70s to 2008. So this man in our time was still doing his show and doing his purposeful work. But shout out again, I want to mention to Hampton University, because Hampton is one of the schools that Toni Brown was a professor at. In addition to serving as a professor at Central Washington University, Federal City College, and also Howard University, helping to shape the next generation of journalists, and dare I say, diverse journalists and Black journalists, okay? But also an additional shout out to Hampton in connection with Toni Brown, because Toni Brown returned to academia after so many years in 2004 and became the first dean of the Scripps Howard School of Journalism and Communications at Hampton University, which is in Hampton, Virginia. And Toni Brown held that post until 2009. In 2012, the Scripps Howard School of Journalism and Communications inducted him into the Hall of Fame in recognizing his leadership in transforming the school into one of the nation's top journalism programs. Wow, that is amazing. So I just needed to say, hey, shout out to Toni Brown. To his family, friends, and loved ones, my condolences on the loss. This man lived a purposeful life. Amazing. A purposeful life. He conducted plenty of interviews, commentary, documentaries, capturing great voices of our time. And one thing I remember about, I think Toni Brown's journal came on like a Sunday morning or Saturday morning, something like that. Toni Brown always had on a nice suit, and he kind of spoke with a straight face. He had his glasses on. He kind of reminded me of one of my great uncles, just a straight, straightforward speaking, professional man, giving the news in the Black community, talking about education and political talk. But at the end of every Toni Brown journal, Toni Brown always had a very positive saying at the end, and it was always very Black. I don't quite remember, exactly what his tagline was, but it was, something related to the Black community, to Black culture, always giving encouragement, always talking about the pursuit of education, the pursuit of excellence, and of course, knowing what was going on in the community. In other words, Toni Brown came before folks like, Tavis Smiley. He came before the various pioneers of journalism. He came before, the BET News segments and things like that. So definitely I wanted to kind of come on to shout out Toni Brown and say thank you, sir, for your contributions. We understand that your work was very important, and you definitely groomed and inspired generations of writers and journalists and those on TV, journalism, media, inspired them to do what they wanted to do in pursuing their dreams, because you pursued your dream. And so Toni Brown, may he rest in peace. Okay, so I also want to mention, now let's go to, I'm only going to talk about a few topics and then I'm going to sign off. I know you guys are watching the BET Awards, so I am going to get back to that. But So tonight, I don't know if you all heard, but tonight, Lauryn Hill is supposed to receive an Icon Award. So, according to okplayer.com, and you may have seen this on some of the socials, Lauryn Hill is to receive culture's biggest, the culture's biggest night, the inaugural Living Legend Icon Award. So OK Player reports that Miss Hill is set to be honored at the 2006 BET Awards, which is going on tonight. And Miss Hill will receive the Living Legend Icon Award sponsored by Sprite on Sunday, June 28th. The Living Legend Icon Award. It honors the pioneers who mastered their craft and never let go of the culture. This distinction belongs to the artists and creators whose body of work has remained essential not because the culture held on to them, but because they never stopped holding on to it. Further, OK Player discusses audiences were first introduced to a teenage Lauryn Hill in Sister Act 2. That came out in 1993. I'm sure we've all seen that movie. Lauryn Hill was just so cute in that movie. She was a young girl at that time. But she later became a member of the groundbreaking hip hop group, the Fugees, which we know had Pras Michelle and also Wyclef Jean and Lauryn Hill. So the trio of them. And they would really break through big with their sophomore album, The Score, in 1996. And after that album's legendary commercial and critical success, Hill shifted her work and attention to her solo career. And we know that she had a landmark award-winning album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which she produced on. She sang, rapped, wrote songs, had wonderful duets on that album with folks like, I want to say, was that the album that she did the duet with Mary J. Blige? And she had the duet with Stephen Marley. And also, I believe, with the late, great D'Angelo, may he rest. So that album was wonderful. I love that album so much. That album, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, was pure poetry. Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was like, to me, it was like Lauryn Hill reaching her hero's journey, reaching that, that level, the levels, of the hero's journey after she had gone through the challenges and gone through, working with a group, really needing to be that star on her own. She was already a star with the Fugees, but Lauryn Hill had greater works inside of her as a singer, as a songwriter, as a musician. And so her debut solo album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, has been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. And Lauryn Hill has been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And in 2022, she was inducted into the Black Music and Entertainment Walk of Fame. And so it's totally fitting that Lauryn Hill would receive an Icon Award from BET. I hope that there are more Icon Awards for her to come, such as the MTV Awards, as well as Billboard. I believe she deserves them all. She's already received many Grammys for her work. She's been touring nonstop for years. Well, touring constantly, rather consistently. And to me, she is a living legend. And why wait until someone is, much older and at the end of their career to give them their flowers? So certainly, because of Lauryn Hill's length of, service to the community and to the culture, she definitely deserves her flowers and deserves an Icon Award with BET. So congratulations, Miss Lauryn Hill. We all are so proud of you and so happy for your achievements. Okay. So I'm going to now talk Nerdacity reads. So before I close out, so what am I reading? What are we reading as the Nerdacity community this summer? I first want to talk about The Flower Bearers by Rachel Eliza Griffiths. This is a memoir. So most of you all, if you know who Rachel Eliza Griffiths is, she is a beautiful poet, and also a visual artist, a photographer. And I know Rachel Eliza Griffiths from Brooklyn. Just years ago, me being around and being a young poet myself, and seeing Rachel Eliza and many of the poets who came up with her. So let's just read Rachel's bio. She's a multimedia artist, a poet, and novelist. Rachel Eliza received the MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence College and is a recipient of numerous fellowships. Her literary and visual works have been widely published in journals, magazines, anthologies, and periodicals. Griffiths is widely known for her literary portraits, fine art photography, and lyric videos. And so her debut novel rather is titled Promise, that was published in 2023 by Random House, and was a Kirkus Reviews and Chicago Public Library Best Book of the Year. And her memoir just came out this year in January 2026. And just want to share with you a bit without giving it away. And shout out to Rachel Eliza. Yes, I have my autographed copy from Rachel Eliza. Thank you, Rachel Eliza. This book is so beautiful. So without giving too much away, this is a beautiful memoir, nonfiction read that basically chronicles Rachel Eliza's journey in getting married, but also in regard to her memories and loss of her best friend. So I don't want to give away too much, but I'll just say Nerdacity is recommending this book as a summer 2026 read. So definitely, hopefully you'll be able to check this out. I have hardback, but maybe by now there is a paperback out, or even the digital Kindle read. For those of you that like to read on your reader or your iPad, you may want to check that out. So I'm going to also shout out Dana A. Williams, Dr. Dana A. Williams, the author of Toni at Random. Isn't this a beautiful book? And so Dana Williams' book is about the experiences of Toni Morrison, the great novelist, writer, editor, Toni Morrison, and her years at Random House, the writers and authors she worked with, her experiences. And, Dana in her recent interviews discusses all the various connections and relationships in the writing community that Toni Morrison had. And Dana talks about interviewing the various writers and people who remember Toni Morrison at that time, and just the extensive amount of research that went into this book for about 20 years that Dana Williams was working on this book. So this book is really, it was a writing journey for Dana A. Williams, and certainly a gem and a treat for us to understand and learn the background of Toni Morrison as an editor. We know a lot about Toni Morrison as a novelist, but this is our first chance to really get a glimpse of what those decisions were that Toni Morrison was making about bringing books, signing Black authors to Random House, and really having, being in a great position to herald in the new generation of writers, Black writers who were writing during the time in which she was working at Random House. So I'm very thankful to receive this book, and I do have my autographed copy. Shout out to Dr. Dana A. Williams. This is a beautiful book, and congratulations. Dana has been receiving so many awards for this book. It's receiving excellent reviews, and she's doing many different interviews and talks. You may catch her on a virtual interview or podcast interview. So definitely, if you can pick up Toni at Random, this is one of our Nerdacity reads for summer 2026. Okay, you all. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was my bit of culture talk and a bit of book talk for tonight on Nerdacity with DuEwa. Definitely subscribe to my channel. I may pop in here periodically in between the other work that I'm doing, and hopefully, we can chop it up, and maybe you guys will be able to chat with me on culture topics, book news, and any other kind of news, inspiration, and otherwise that we want to talk about. Okay, thanks so much for joining me and see you all.